Last year's conference, for those of you that remember were here, explored how governance might evolve in the face of constant crises and how well our institutions are prepared to cope with the dynamic challenges which mark our age. Today, we find ourselves involved in yet another perhaps crisis to manage, that of artificial intelligence, where regulators are striving to find the right tone as we struggle to understand this nascent technology. Indeed, this year's conference, AI and Policies for the Future, the challenges of regulating AI, could not come at a more salient time. With the explosion of ChatGPT and other chatbots, AI has slowly permeated all areas of public life, inspiring both optimism about its possibilities, but also very much fear about those who will be left behind. Following Sunak's recent AI summit at Bletchley House, the comprehensive EU Act that's in the works, and China's leading role in the field, I think we stand at a crossroad for international policy cooperation. And amidst all of this confusion, and in line with our society's mission, we believe a more nuanced understanding of policy issues encourage a healthy, informed debates about these fundamental issues. We invited thought leaders, academics, and policy professionals to join us today and explore the challenges AI poses in the fields of education, economics, and ethics. Thank you for joining us today. Neither would today's conference be possible without the hard work and dedication of our conference directors, Leonis Pouch, Leo Wang, Matthias Clements, our Deputy Director Claire, and all our first-year reps who are helping out on the day. Thank you to all of you. And last but not least, I'm very grateful to our trustees, in particular George Bangham and George Stokes, who's joining us here today, for their steadfast support and indispensable advice in running the society. I hope all of you enjoy the conference and that you check out our society and its other means, mainly policy and events. Hopefully something interesting to you, and for the sixth form students here, hopefully start to think about public policy and how we build successful policies for the next generation. For now, though, I'm glad to welcome Wilberforce's longtime friend and chair of our Board of Patrons, Lord Wilson, to address you all. Lord Wilson, thank you so much.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much for that introduction. I should just say to you, it gives me huge pleasure to see the Wilberforce Society still existing and acting and attracting such a good audience. In 2009, 15 years ago, 3 students who I had never met came. I was Master of Emmanuel, and they came and sat on my sofa and explained that they wanted to set up a think tank. They were Nick Crawford, Tom Davenport, and Ben Walters. They wanted to set up a think tank, and they wanted someone senior in the university to, as it were, back them and support them, which was required for university societies. And I blindly agreed, thinking it would last for 2 or 3 years, because, with all respect, most student activities only last as long as the original enthusiasts are still around. But and they did, and they grew, much smaller than you are now, and they produced a society with some amazingly good papers, which we managed to get into government, and which, made a contribution to policy. And the society grew. And it did not die when the first 3 years. Great people have come along since and picked up the mantle. Thank you, George. And I'm very proud of the fact that you're still active. And I believe there's a real place in the world for you to contribute thinking before you're burdened with all the troubles that come later in life, while you see things afresh, and while you've got insights and energy which other people in power may not have got. So I would like to, first of all, congratulate you and welcome you to the Wilberforce Society, if I may, and say what a pleasure it is to stand here like this and to open your conference. I'm not going to talk long. I just want to say one thing. I think it's marvelous that you're looking at AI, whether it's a monster or a miracle. Do remember that Galileo, when he thought that the earth went round the sun, was dismissed by the church as foolish, absurd, and heretical. It's very hard at the time to know how radical change is going to shape and what difference it's going to make. But there's one thing which I believe strongly, and I hope government ministers present will forgive me. But one of the things I learned, I was in the civil service for 37 years, and I was head of the civil service for 5. And I dealt with ministers, several of them on that wall over there, who I used to listen at the Cambridge Union and who now are well known or retired from politics, John Gummer, Michael Howard, Kenneth Clarke and so on. And I've worked for Prime Ministers, Thatcher, Blair and Major. With the honourable exception of Mrs Thatcher, government ministers do not have a background in science and technology. You're talking about regulation today. It is vital that the people who do the regulation understand what they're doing. This may sound a very novel thought to you, but it's very important that ministers should have, and people in business, agencies who regulate and so on, should have the background that enables them to do the job well. The complexity of the issues which you're describing and discussing today are, I think, mind-bending. It's very hard to know how in the future we'll be able to trust anything you read you see on television, on the screen, or possibly read in a newspaper. How we're going to distinguish the truth from things which have been produced by AI is a challenge which I do not begin to get my mind round. But I'm tempted to tell you a story about John Major, who I think will forgive me. Ministers do not have the background, very often, in science or technology to handle the issues that come their way. I remember when mad cow's disease, BSE, first hit government, and we had to ban exports, we had to take all sorts of very radical steps urgently to control the spread of the disease among cattle. And it was the product of research in a number of universities. And John Major had to stand up on the floor of the House at 2 o'clock at that time and announce very radical, unpleasant measures to control the spread of the disease, which is going to damage the farming community and British exports and so on. And we got all the academics in to tell him why it was a serious problem. And they sat there giving him a very technical analysis full of probabilities. And, there's this possibility and we're not sure, but we think that, and so on. And eventually he slammed the table and said, look, I can't deal with this. I want the truth. And we all laugh because the trouble is the truth is far more complex than you can produce on the floor of the House of Commons. And similarly, in other issues, Mr. Blair was taking very important decisions on nanotechnology. And I arranged, with courtesy of colleagues in Cambridge, for a lot of academics to come and brief him on nanotechnology. And I realized as we sat round the table with these people talking to him, that he was very polite and he was nodding and thanking them, but he didn't actually understand what they were saying. And they were too generous in their assumptions about him to realize they were talking to someone whose physics and chemistry was somewhere around pre-O level, pre-GCSE. And the session was a failure. He didn't grasp it. So when you look at how you regulate, will you think about the training of ministers, the training of people in agencies? It's very important that you have access available to people in power, because this will have to be debated in Parliament. There'll be legislation, and I sit in the Lords and listen to very technical bills sometimes, and it's very important that the people who are responsible for legislation and for the exercise of power, that they have the background that enables them to do the job. And you can think, how will we actually train them? How do we make this accessible to the public, to the people who watch television? It's a major change which you're discussing today, radical potential for society. How do we equip society to cope with what's going to hit them? That's the question that bothers me more even than the other issues which are here. So now I'm going to stop because I've talked for too long, and I'm very grateful to you, and I wish you a really brilliant afternoon. Well done, the Wilberforce Society. Well done, the people in charge. I hope you have a very good discussion. I shall listen to part of it, and I'm looking forward to it enormously. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much. Next, we'll be joined by our keynote speaker, Jaan Tallinn, who'll be logging into Zoom. So we'll just wait for a few minutes for him to log on. And then oh, there he is. There we go. Hand over to Linus to do the moderation.
Hello, Jan, can you hear me? Perfect. So let me quickly introduce you. So we are pleased to be joined by Mr. Jaan Tallinn, and we are going to have a quick, short, virtual conversation with him about the risk of artificial intelligence and how to deal with this new type of technology. Jaan is a computer expert, investor, and philanthropist, and has participated in development of numerous companies and technologies such as the file-sharing application Kazaa. He built the groundwork of Skype and has directly or indirectly invested in over 180 companies and startups. He was also an early investor in the AI research laboratory DeepMind of Google in 2014. But most importantly for today, he also co-founded the Center for the Study of Existential Risk here at the University of Cambridge. Thank you for joining us today, Jaan. So maybe to start off, when did you came to first notice the risk and the immense power of artificial intelligence and artificial intelligence development? And what do you think, when was the moment when the industry realized what artificial intelligence can do?
So for me, my first exposure to artificial intelligence was when I was running a games company in the 1990s. But I never thought much of it, other than it seems like a useful thing when you want to make characters appear intelligent. But then I think in 2007 or 2008, I stumbled upon the writing of Wilberforce, who was back then making this case that continues to make today, that creation of smarter than human intelligence will likely spell the end of humanity. That sounded to me like very weird, so I had to. But I couldn't find any logical mistakes in his argument, so I met up with him in 2009. And after that, I became convinced that yes, this is the most important thing facing humanity, that pretty much nobody was paying attention to it. So that was my start of, that was the start of my journey. When it comes to industry, I think that has been a gradual process, and I would say a significant percentage of industry still is dismissive of AI being either positive or negative future shaping force. Sometimes I joke that some parts of the industry is like, oh, we're just developing AI to help the elderly.
Thank you. I mean, you mentioned that you read this book and then you saw the argument and you completely agreed with it. What do you think makes this case so compelling? What are the main reasons why you think that, for example, I remember you giving a speech in the Oxford Union a couple of months ago that 88% of AI engineers think AI could destroy the world, and that this is also very short term. So what are the main cases that convinced you?
So, I mean, first of all, I think like everybody has a uncertainty about what actually will happen once we have to share the planet with other minds that are possibly more capable than humans are, and possibly like much more capable than humans are. So nobody knows, but like really important realization is that nobody knows doesn't mean that we're safe. A lot of
Right. And I mean, you said that is also a thing that is actually lethal, could potentially be lethal in the next 2 years. What do you think? Why is this urgency certainly coming about in the last couple of months or year? And what makes you think is in the next 2 years we're actually going to have potential crisis? Do you then find a case of, let's say, Sam Altman of OpenAI convincing that he says, oh, we definitely want to be regulated, we want to have governments saying what we can and cannot do, or is that more a publicity stunt? And I mean, what is your thoughts on that? And maybe on that note, I mean, you also, I think, signed the Future of Life appeal for a memorandum on AI development. Was it more a symbolic act, or do you think that, especially because AI is such a global technology and is crossing legislatory boundaries, that actually such a thing is possible, or is even the best way to go about it, considering maybe other regulatory efforts? As I understand, one of the two ways you sort of spend your days with is, on the hand, public awareness, but also actually talking to governments, trying to find ways to regulate artificial intelligence. But my wondering is how you actually deal with these really differences in AI legislation, from the EU Act to EU AI Act to the British way of regulating, to the Chinese way of regulating, to basically no regulation in states like the United Arab Emirates. we then look at international organizations such as UN for help, or is that, do you think, a not very productive way of going about regulating AI? One could also look at the ways governments deal with regulation of nuclear weapons, nuclear energy. Are these things comparable to AI regulation? Okay, maybe I push you on then in a certain direction. What would be a responsible AI regulation framework? So what are like three main things that you think are necessary for not only, not stopping AI development, but making it responsible? Is it even possible? Can we have ethical AI development, especially if you consider AI as being like black boxes where not even the AI engineers really know what's going on inside the algorithms? And if you implement all that, where would you sort of say are the main benefits of AI development? What can actually AI, if done responsible, if done ethical, contribute to our social life? So where are the most important societal changes in your opinion? if you're so cautious to paint a utopian future, maybe what do you think is more dangerous, and why? Artificial intelligence, sort of in the civil sphere, so what we see in AI and applications in the industry, or is it really also AI in the hands of governments? I'm thinking about military applications, for example.
Incentives are much worse in military. The term arms race. Arms races are things that you are involved in because the other party is involved in. So it's like a pretty much giving up some future that you would say positive.
Thank you so much. I think for the last 5 to 7 minutes, we could open up to the audience, if that's all right. So please raise your hands if you have a question. Fair enough. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you. If nothing else, for taking like rogue AGI seriously. Could you say any more about what realistic efforts for an off switch or mitigating like a singularity scenario might look like?
How can we fortify the ethical integrity of AI systems to prevent the escalation of risks such as algorithmic discrimination, data breaches, privacy erosions, aligned with human well-being?
One last question.
Yeah, when you started working on AI safety, it absolutely was a neglected problem, massively neglected. But now we have a summit and an EU AI Act that might be pre-GPT. Could you speak a little bit about how you see the neglectedness of AI safety and ideally where you now think the neglected areas are?
Okay, thank you. I think one last final question from me, and then we can sort of come to a conclusion. I mean, you founded the Center of Existential Risk with two other highly esteemed academics. How do you think, or where do you see sort of the intersections between the existential risk of artificial intelligence to the existential risk of, let's say, climate change or pandemics? So there could be potential also helps, like AI could help to remedy, for example, the climate change and help for a greener future. But on the other hand side, there might also be other intersections. What do you think? Thank you so much, and thank you for taking your time today to talk to us. It was, I think, a perfect introduction to the challenges and the risk of artificial intelligence and the need for regulation. So thank you so much, Jaan, for taking your time. Thank you. So now now that introductory part of today is over. Now we move on to the panels. So all panelists generally today, also all three, will follow a similar pattern. So